Welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood, and welcome Dr. Marcy Cole to the conversation today. I reached out to Dr. Cole just a few weeks ago after I had read a beautiful article that actually I think was a few years old on Goop.com. And I immediately thought, oh, I would love to ask her to be on the show. So the article I read was about the work in relationships and how we show up for them and how we can learn and practice to become better in them. I'm going to say a few words about Dr. Cole before we dive in. And I'll start with Dr. Marcy Cole is a holistic psychotherapist and personal development and relationship coach. Her client sessions with individuals and couples around the world are via phone or Zoom. And so Dr. Cole has a wide breadth of articles that have been written for Goop, for Maria Shriver's Sunday paper, the Huffington Post, and Thrive Global, or as well as 2 best-selling books that are anthologies. And I really would love to take a look at those. And, one of the reasons, Dr. Cole, that your work really appealed to me is there was a lot of crossover for topics that we talk about, whether it be relationships or how we thrive at midlife or, even going into parenting. It was a wide array. But like I said in the intro, you used really unique language to refer to it. And I think that that can be so valuable for listeners to think of things in new ways that they haven't before. So maybe walking away from today's interview with new language, a new conversation, a new framework, and new resources. So I welcome you and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I love
Mhm.
talking about this stuff, Maureen. It's all so good. It's juicy and it's part of life. It's on every front. How we perceive things, how we feel about things, how we express things is everything.
I love that. And I think that, when I read about your body of work and how many years you've been working with clients and how you've just done a deep dive into these topics, it results in a person, a professional, a soul who can really come to the table and be able to talk about things very deeply. So I love that. And so I was reading part of your background and I see that you were educated in the Chicago area and I'm right outside of Chicago. So
Yeah.
it's always near and dear to my heart that you went to Northwestern and then you got your graduate degrees here as well, your
Mhm.
master's and your PhD. So yeah, when you got started, what was your first interest? How did you get started in the field of psychology?
I really believe that just like the stars align for us today, I do believe in sort of divine intervention. And so had a very, very successful career in television, media sales in my 20s. And I needed a roommate, and a woman showed up. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm getting my master's in clinical social work." And I was like, "What's that?" And literally, you know how you have those little, we have these little whispers.
Hmm.
And I got curious and I just had kind of a knowing. I didn't even know that was possible to have a 2-year degree. I thought you had to go back for a PhD, which I later did. But
Yeah.
at the time, I had no interest in putting that much investment in at the time.
Wow.
I thought that sounds amazing. So I went to my manager and I said, I really want to go to school part time and study this. And he said, go for it. He never thought I would actually quit. I think he thought it was like a passing fancy, but I just knew it in my heart and soul. I thought, I have this I have this very successful career, but it's not really feeding
Yeah.
my soul. And I really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to contribute something in this world. And I thought that's the direction I need to go in. And that was the beginning.
Yeah. And so she was the perfect messenger for you at that time to kind of, and it is true that when something is said to us, it can kind of like almost hook us and we get curious and then we have the choice of whether we follow it or not. And sometimes you may have found in your life that maybe it'll come back later or, a month
Yeah.
later or 5 years later. Yeah.
That's right. And we need to listen. We need to listen for those taps that say where there's no ambivalence. There's just a pure channel of curiosity, interest, calling, whether it be what we're called to do with our work, whether it be where we're called to live. I remember being East Coast bound for college, but the minute I stepped foot on the Northwestern campus on a debate tournament in my high school years, I was like, oh my God, I want to be
Yeah.
here, you know? And the same is true for people and relationships, the collegial relationships you're drawn to, your friendships, your love affairs, it's chemical. We need
Yeah.
to trust it.
Yeah, I love the message. And how has that blend for you? What did that background in TV and media do for you when you entered a new career space?
Great question. I've never been asked that question. I think it's terrific. And what comes to my mind, Maureen, and everyone listening, is that what I realized in sales is that the good news is I did have a quality product to sell or share. They were affiliate stations around the country. So it wasn't a hard sell, but it was a competitive situation because you had to get the highest share of, advertising dollars on your station. And at the end of the day, when things were almost
Mm.
equal or close enough, it all came down to relationships. It all came down to
Wow.
relationships. It came
Mm.
down to
Hmm.
the rapport. It came down to someone trusting your integrity and your authenticity. And I remember thinking, this isn't that hard. If you just be yourself, do the right thing, service your clients and show up with kindness, really, and goodwill. And so that's what I learned. So that was a big one.
That's beautiful. Those are some in your 20s too, to be already learning all those skills and to be able to take them into that second career, and also that permission that it's okay to change careers. It's okay to change paths, and especially if it's going to serve our higher good and our higher purpose, but maybe
That's right.
always. Yeah.
That's right.
Hmm.
And here's the thing, when we do change our step and our path, there will always be that little, questioning voice or critical parent voice or whatever critical, wherever that came from in your life. And there will be others that say, what are you doing? What are you talking about? What are you
Yeah.
doing? My dad, who meant well, of course, he was flabbergasted that I was giving up this career. Like, he was just like,
Yeah.
oh my God,
Hmm.
they're grooming you for management. What are you doing? But when and or if you're getting out of a relationship, or you're, it's whatever your calling is, whatever you, don't be surprised if there are voices within yourself or around you that are coming from a place of doubt, judgment, or fear. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, our knowing and the truth of our heart is way louder, and that's what we have to trust.
Yeah. And you'll keep on kind of leaning into that. I was thinking about how, you've got your past career, you've got your trainings, I mean, deep work and your master's and your PhD, but then you have your lived experience and you have all these countless hours of sitting with clients. So you see this. You are, I am sure, their guide, but you see that kind of return. What is your truth? What is your truth? And how to kind of quiet those outside voices and say
Yes.
thank you, but quiet them. Mhm.
Absolutely. And if someone said, what is the number one thing that creates despair? It's disconnection.
Mm.
It's a
Mhm.
disconnection from
Mhm.
ourselves, from our truth, from what we know to be true, from our channeled wisdom,
Yeah,
from the right pathway that is waiting for us. And when we disconnect from that, that's when we get lost and we get anxious and we get depressed and disconnected again from ourselves and others. But the good news is we can always find our way back, always.
that's beautiful. Mhm. So I'm sensing some themes too, like when I was looking through your work on your website, we can talk about the article that I was attracted to on goop.com, but you had one that was entitled The Power of Women in Connection, Collaboration, Celebration, and Community. And then I was also reading about your involvement with a group that maybe you can speak about, or why it was so valuable and rich, First Tuesdays. But these themes that seem to be coming across in your work, the
Mhm.
tapping into the true who are you at that level. And I think that, would you say behind that too has been your own transformation over the years?
Oh, absolutely. I think in order for us to really contribute something that
Mm.
people can relate to, this is not about I'm an expert and it's not the books, it's not the exams, it's not even 1,000 hours of it really, I think the most important thing is tapping into our own lived experience.
Hmm.
And what you just said also, Maureen, was very astute, which is that you saw a connection. And it dawned on me because basically I've always been somebody who's been had my hands in different pots. I have never followed a desire to be like an expert and have a specialty. I'm more of a generalist, and I don't like to have a 30, 40 hour
Yeah.
practice. I do different things, but what I realized is the theme that was consistent in everything was connectivity, like what we were just
Hmm.
talking about. So it was about connection to self. If I'm working one-on-one with someone, what's their connection with themselves from a place of knowing and listening and trusting and valuing.
Mhm.
If I'm working with couples, what's the level and dynamic between them? What connects them? What has disconnected them? How can we bring them back to a place of beautiful, loving connectivity? When I'm working,
Mhm.
and then the community that you reference, First Tuesday Global, it's about connection with community. We have our friends, we have our family, but I really do believe in the ripple effect. I think we need circles around us. I think life is really rich and the world is complex. And the more we have connectivity with more humans in our field that are aligned, the richer our life experience will be.
Oh, beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I can even, when you talk about first Tuesdays in the concentric circles, that feels so energetic to me. And, I always hear and I know it to be true that when those changes are made or we're affecting the field with, these kind of groups that like first Tuesdays is, it just has a ripple effect. And we don't even know, of course, on an individual level, but also on the collective level too, both are being called for right now.
It's true. And
Yeah.
someone just said to me, actually, you interviewed me on her podcast, which I never knew this, but when I was producing it was called First Tuesday, and then First Tuesday LA, and then First Tuesday
Mhm.
USA, and now it's First Tuesday Global because now we're virtual and anyone can join us. But I've just also realized these are life enrichment events. I was producing them live once a month. And Paige Nolan, who has a beautiful podcast as well, she said, Marcy, when I came to your event years ago, we're talking,
Mhm.
12, 13, 14 years ago, she said, you were the first one merging professional development and self-development with spirituality. And
Mhm.
she said, I'd never seen that done before. Now it's everywhere. Now,
Yeah.
here's the thing. And all humility, I say this seriously from the bottom of my, I had no idea that
Right.
what I was doing. I was just so the point is when we connect with ourselves and we feel called to create something, to share something, to write something, just do it. Because
Mhm.
to your point, you have no idea the ripple effects of the meaning it will have on one person, not to mention the collective.
It's so beautiful, and that message you just gave is so encouraging to the listener. Because I was gonna say, you said, like, when you were around 30, that's when you kind of were like, "Oh, I'm interested in this new career." And I think that, a lot of the listeners of the podcast, it's a wide range, but a lot at midlife, and a lot of women at midlife are recreating themselves. So the message of it's never too late to begin, and you can begin with, would you speak to that? Like what you might consider the smallest of offerings, but it can have a big impact.
Well, of course. I mean, I'm actually this Monday, which might not be in sync with when this is aired, but I'm producing another one of our First Tuesday Global Wisdom of the Ages theme events. And I
Very cool.
produced three of them that were live, and this one's going to be virtual. And this is seven women 75 plus sharing their life experience wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
And one is 77 and one is 81. And these women take my breath away. And some of them were not videotaped. And I just kick myself because I'm like, oh my God, this is gold.
Right.
All of them were, they talk about generativity in our golden years. And that's what creates life satisfaction and contribution. All of these women had had multiple chapters of experiences with different things. All of them were still in real time. I had an 85-year-old one. So she was juggling three different things like I do, three different callings, projects, offerings in her life. Unbelievable. She was 4'8" and she jumps up with the three pieces.
Ama-
I mean, like you just, oh my gosh. And everyone in the room was like, wow, who is she? I mean, the point is,
yeah.
there's never, ever, ever too late because we all have something to share. And it's exciting. If people look at, I heard this thing about it's not retiring, it's refiring. I don't know who made that up. But if all of us look at life as just, oh, okay, what now?
Right.
What now?
Right.
There's a big
Yeah.
wide world and we have so much inside of us and to learn, to share with others so that never expires ever.
No, and it makes me think of like when we refer to like on a soul level, your soul doesn't want to retire at 65. Your soul doesn't want to keep doing the same stuff. And we're
Right.
just awakening to that more and more.
That's right.
So I wanted to refer to, where I first discovered you on the Goop article. And it was a lot about communications. That one was called 10 Communication Patterns That Hurt Relationships. But I think that talk around relationships, it's actually not a topic. I think if you air in a couple weeks, you'll be about episode 77. But the work of relationships is not one that I've covered that much. I've done connection to self, connection to community, but like with the word, like relationships, surprisingly, I talk a lot about it, spirituality here. And I get in a roundabout way I have, but what I want to say is the language you use, you talk about interpersonal IQ. And the reason I loved that was it just caught me. It did hook me, but I'm very interested in the multiple intelligences we have as human beings, because I just did an episode on creativity and how so many of us learned to believe we weren't creative. I think it's probably for men and women, but myself and many women I know have said we did not feel like we were intelligent. So just
Mm,
this taking that IQ, which was so confined to only mean one thing, to really broaden it out and then make it interpersonal. I just love it so much. So
I'm
can you
so
kind of like go into how you came up with it and what it means to you?
Yeah, I don't, I really wish I remembered the moment. I'm not sure. I felt like
Mhm.
I coined the phrase, but I don't think I did. I'm sure it has been used by others. Mary Morrissey once says, when you have an inspired idea, it's coming through a lot of different spirits, souls on the planet, just in different ways and different times. The way it came through me is I was like, well,
Mhm.
oh, actually, I do know the moment. I do know the moment. I was driving with a friend and there was somebody renting a room in my home at the time. And I spent all this time with him getting oriented. And I was in the passenger seat and I was saying to my friend, he never once asked one question
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
my world. I asked a million questions about his because I was genuinely interested. Never one question. And I thought, God, he doesn't have a lot of interpersonal IQ. My friend almost stopped the
Yeah.
car and
Mhm.
said, Marcy, this is your book. Or this is what you have to write about because
Oh.
this comes
Yeah.
through you like water. And here's the takeaway for all of us. There's a lot I don't know anything about. I mean, so much that I feel like don't ask me where I'm going when I'm driving the car, like direction and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, don't ask me to fix stuff I'm not a techie girl, but this kind of thing comes naturally for me.
Yep.
And I heard someone on the stage once say, "Can you see the tip of your nose?" Like, most of it, what comes naturally to us, we cannot see, and that's why
Mhm.
we need each other
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
mirror and to echo. Guess what? This is a value because what comes naturally to us, others might need to hear so that they can develop that within themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that
So,
it's your gift.
so that's why when I was writing about it, I was asked to actually do a workshop at the Goop gathering they do once a year or whatever. And I just sort of put this together and then I'm like, well, this has to be an article because
Yeah.
this is, fun stuff. It's good stuff. It's relevant and could hopefully be helpful. And I thought so it's in interpersonal IQ. The idea is that it's the merger between emotional intelligence and communication. The
Mm.
words
Mhm.
we use, the framing, the timing, it matters. That was the overarching idea.
Well, I love it because I think for myself it's funny. My former career was speech language pathology. Funny,
Mhm.
not funny, because now here I am with a podcast, using my voice,
Mm.
drawing out others' voices, all the
Yes.
things. And
Yes.
communication isn't something that interpersonally, this type, easy. Social communication, I can do. But I think coming from a family, being fifth of six kids, being the quiet one, Maureen, you're so quiet. My voice quieted a lot. So then I didn't get the practice. And so
Mm.
that's why I think that I loved your article so much, because it was almost like, here's where I see breakdowns in relationships happening. And
Mhm.
here are ways you can begin to practice. And it's just a funny thing, right? We can be practicing in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s if we're willing to do the work. And
Yes.
so that's how I kind of see it. Like you really pointed out, here's patterns I see, whether it's couples blaming each other, keeping score, operating from what you called scar tissue or exit threats. And then here is the way that, you had laid out in the article I love so much is here are the language, the love breaking language, and here's the love making. So the disconnection to the connection.
No, there's no question.
Mm-hmm.
And I will share with you, I will merge what you were talking about before in terms of can at any point in life we pivot into something new with
Mm-hmm.
the learning, growing our emotional IQ and growing our language and
Yeah.
communication skills. When I was giving up part of what I was devoting my time to, I have a holistic psychotherapy practice. I produce the first Tuesday, but that's only once a month or so. But I was working with I was founded this nonprofit for a while that promoted the connection between people without kids by choice or circumstance and children in need. After
Okay.
6 years, I was ready to give it up, and this is what I did. This is for people that are wondering, what am I going to do next? And I say to people, I said, okay, I literally in my prayer, meditation, stillness, I said, okay, I've got some room. I've got some
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Use me, and no uphill climbing. I'm not creating anything from the ground up
Right.
anymore. I've been there, done that. Please bring something that's in alignment with me. What's something new that I can be inspired by and stimulated by, where I can contribute, and that's fun and
Mm-hmm.
that's lucrative. And literally within like a month, when I tell you, I never had this on my radar, Maureen. Like, I got a call and someone said, "Oh, Marcy, this private school is looking for a psychologist. Do you know anyone just like you?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. Let me think." And her husband in the background is like, "Why don't you why didn't she interview?" Bottom line is, I interviewed the head of the
Mm-hmm.
school and I really connected. I said, "Well, I have a private practice. I'm not available full time, and I'm not really interested in being a school counselor." But she said, "Well, we're really interested in developing our social emotional learning curriculum here at the school.
Yeah.
SEL, when you and I were
Mm-hmm.
going to school, Maureen, and lots of
No.
listeners, we didn't have this. What's SEL? It's starting in kindergarten now. Learning self esteem,
Mm-hmm.
respectful communication, conflict resolution,
It's so good.
decision making, children." And I always fantasized, seriously, for years. I said, gosh, if there was like a life 1A for kids from the time they were in first grade for 12 years, can you imagine? Like the
Yeah.
world would be,
Mm-hmm.
it would solve everything. So the point is now the great news is children, because a lot of school systems are integrating this, and children have the opportunity to learn some of this earlier
It's
than we did.
beautiful. Yes, and I had seen that on your website, how you worked for the school, and I'm like, wow, I also have a passion for SEL, and it was in my school district after, I think it was 2010 when Vicki Abelese did Race to Nowhere, and that was this film that broke out, like how the stress that the teens were under and everything, and then that I also advocated on the SEL, but it's so good to see and even you working with families and individuals, what do you see now for the deep needs that are out there for children and families, and any words of like wisdom there, or keep the faith, and here are some even thoughts around it, because families are up against a lot.
A lot. There's a lot
Hmm.
going on in this world. And I will say that my heart really does go out to people raising small kids at this time.
Hmm.
Because when I think about my generation, we were sandwiched in between our parents, World War II, and the
Hmm.
hot mess we're in now. And the truth is, I feel like we coasted. I feel like I
Yeah.
coasted. And now so much of the darkness is really surfacing
Yeah.
around the world on different fronts, and children are being exposed to this in one way or another.
Yeah.
I would
Hmm.
say this has always been important, but it's more important than ever because of so much of the external pressures and distress that's going on and disabling. There's a shaky ground underneath this
Hmm.
earth right now. So, more than ever, parents learning mindfulness for
Hmm.
themselves. What's mindfulness? Being present, learning how to be still and breathe and stay grounded in our own bodies and think about what we want to feed our minds and how we want to open our
Yeah.
heart.
Hmm.
This is everything. And the more we are grounded in that space for ourselves, the more we're available for our children. And I say to my friends and clients and whomever, I'm like, if you're going to read books to your kids at night, read fun books that have beautiful illustrations, but that
Hmm.
also teach a message. Like,
Mm.
feed their souls, like use the time
Yeah.
to feed
Yeah.
them so
Mhm.
that they learn how to breathe through stress. They learn how to ground their energy when things feel topsy-turvy. They learn how to have a boundary around them. They can care for others,
Absolutely.
but they don't have to internalize it all.
Mm.
I mean, such a time as this, we need this more than ever.
Yeah, thank you for that reflection and, wisdom for parents, because it's just another call, that call you just put out, like, you take care of yourself. Never have, for so long, I think, the self-care and just those words, they did just mean go getting a manicure or getting a massage, but the world is up leveling a bit, and it's calling us to do so as well. So I think that those are perfect words of wisdom and
Yes.
an invitation.
For
Mhm.
sure. And right before we got on, I just did this quick, like 1 minute video. I have this like vlog, like everyday alchemy series about how, perception and shifting
Mhm.
perception. I haven't been as consistent with it as but I'm getting a little bit more now.
Yeah.
And it was literally on today. The topic was inspired by a moment with a client, a parent today who talked about, well, they say you're only as happy as your most unhappy child. And I'm like, time out. Wait a second. That's so backward, right? Because if you're as only if your kid's unhappy and you join him in their unhappiness, that's not going to help, right? And the same is true for all the stuff that's going on in the world. This, how do we stay caring without caretaking and taking it in and responsible with absolute responsibility, as though we're in charge and we have any power over someone else's mindset or destiny? We can feed our kids, we can feed their bodies, we can feed their minds. Ultimately, they're going to be on their journey and other people are on theirs.
I love it. And because just not 2 hours ago, I was talking with my teacher, and I said to her, there's this saying that I don't really always agree with, that you're only as happy as your least happiest child. So,
Is that right? Just 2 hours
so
ago?
just 2 hours ago. And what it reminds me of is, because now my kids are 23, 21, and 19.
Mm,
And when something crops up, what I've noticed about myself is that I can stay in my own lane like never before and take care of my emotional needs,
mm,
and then support my young adult child for what they're going through without becoming enmeshed. And sometimes, like when I've heard that saying before, that feels more of an enmeshment to me. And so it's just a differentiation. And I'm just laughing that you're bringing that up, because
This is,
you don't hear it often, but I was talking about it today. So that's a
see,
great
the stars
synchronicity.
did align, Maureen. They absolutely aligned for us today.
Yeah. But I want to say too that I love the fact that you said I do work with a wide variety of types of work, because for me, being in coaching for a few years now, being a newer podcaster, is that everyone says you need to niche down. You need to niche down in order to, attract your right client and all the things. But sometimes, well, do you, or do you just need to follow that inner compass? And maybe your inner compass looks different than that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. I did just take an Amy Porterfield class,
Yeah.
because the truth is, there is something to be said for being strategic and mindful about how you want to contribute. And if you don't feel a calling to just stay in one lane, as
Hmm.
you said, and expertise, then don't do it. That said, if someone's building a entrepreneurial personal development
Yeah.
business, you do need, she calls them pillars. So you
Hmm.
put them under pillars, and you need to
Yeah.
be able to, share those in appropriate ways that can grow your audience and share your message. And hopefully, again, which is really about, then you're able to contribute on a wider scope.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so no, look, when people just try to pigeonhole themselves because that's what their parents expected, or that's what they think the only way they're going to make money, or, ultimately it's not going to be a long,
Hmm.
beautiful experience of fulfillment. They're going to burn out, or they're going to get bored, or they're going to get back to that thing
Yeah.
about disconnection. They're going to feel disconnected. So we got to
Hmm.
stay true to ourselves around every turn. And when we're not sure, that's okay. We
Yeah.
can be in the I don't know, I'm exploring phase.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I just having the conversation with you, when you talk about, 75 plus women sharing their life stories and their life wisdoms and their, the exact way that it's coming through them to your work with parents and families and speaking to that audience. It's all, like you said, like you started with, it's all about connection. And it's getting back to that connection. And, I think some of those things too are, they can feel so abstract to people, and so it's just language. But how do you usually talk to people out about starting to build in just some sort of compassionate self-care, and
Of
where's a
course.
beginning point for that?
Right.
Mhm.
Well, time is a human construct, first of all.
Mhm.
We kind of made it up. And
Yeah.
we don't have to run out of time. It's
Mm.
really in our head, and therefore the good news is it's within our control. There's a lot we're not in control over. This we are,
Mhm.
even when it feels like we're not. I mean, I'm Maureen, and this is not going to be foreign to you. I'm really, really feel so strongly about a morning practice. And
Mm.
I say to my, especially my my people that have to be at a work setting and have two kids to feed in the morning, I'm
Yeah.
like, you set your alarm 10 minutes earlier, and this is your time to wake up, to say good
Mhm.
morning to yourself.
Yeah.
Hand on heart, good morning. Linda Gray, who was, a very successful actor in Hollywood that was in Dallas, I believe, who shot JR. She was his husband. Remember JR's wife? She was the
Yes.
character. Linda Gray is amazing. And she was one of my guests in one of the Wisdom of the Ages live events in LA.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
she said, when I get up, when my feet hit the floor, I say thank you. And I thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful
Oh, wait.
practice.
Mhm.
And I thought, what a beautiful, these are little low hanging fruit moments that we can do for ourselves, saying hello to ourselves and the good morning to ourselves,
Yeah.
literally
Mhm.
taking a few breaths, before we get out of bed, feeling where it lands in our
Love that.
body, envisioning the day we want to have. This is a
Yeah.
very, very, this is quantum physics. This is real deal stuff. You
Yeah.
envision the day you want to have, right? The places you want to go, the safety, the security, the light,
Mm.
the love, the exchange, the kindness, right? The lovely surprises, the
Yeah.
prosperity, whatever it is.
Mhm.
You imagine I love the image of a big gold bubble, big gold light.
Mhm.
Send
Mhm.
it, just blast it out there, put it around yourself. Anything that doesn't resonate is going to bounce off, and then you get to share that with others who are receptive. And so,
Mhm.
of course, if you're going to give it 15 minutes, get out a yoga mat, do some stretching, do some literally grounding on the floor, get your body just moving a little bit, and then of course a nutritious breakfast. I mean, look, these are the morning hours set the tone.
Absolutely. All beautiful practices, and just they say to me a way of waking up and saying to yourself, I'm going to create this time because I'm worth it. I'm going to check in with myself because I'm deserving of it. And, it may just take a few minutes, and I love that, setting the tone for the day. It's beautiful.
And
Mhm.
also, I will also
Yeah.
say that for people who say, well, I don't feel like I deserve it. I don't, like, they
Mm.
have those critical voices, and it's hard for them to say, I love myself, or I deserve it, or here's the thing, muscle testing. I love to do an exercise live with people with muscle testing. If I tried to muscle test you and you say something and I say something and you repeat it back, that's not true.
Mhm.
And I try to pull your fingers apart or your arm or whatever, wherever I'm muscle testing, it's going to go weak every single time.
Wow.
If
Yep.
you move it into truth, it stays strong even with resistance. The same is true for when they talk about affirmations. It's not
Mhm.
psychobabble. It's neuroplasticity of the brain. It's what we choose to feed our brain, and then it sends a signal to our body, and then we
Mm.
feel better. My mother, who was in her 90s, I'd be walking her with a walker down the hallway, and she'd be like, I'm tired, I want to go, I say, Mom,
Yeah.
one more round. Okay, repeat after me. My body is healthy and strong. My body is healthy and strong. And she'd say, my body is, and all of a sudden her knees were going up, and we'd do
Wow.
another round.
Yep.
So in the morning, I say, even if your critical mind says, I don't believe it, well, guess what?
Mhm.
Choose
Mhm.
Esther Hicks will call it
Yeah.
a higher feeling thought or better feeling thought.
Yeah.
Choose a belief and choose words that are life affirming.
Ooh. Yeah.
Choose them
Hmm. Hmm.
and then see how it feels and just go with that.
Yeah, and just like we were talking about with relationships and the communication, just practice, just try it. I really love how you weave in the spirituality and sort of the soul work or the law of attraction or whatever it's called. What I really sense from you is that embodiment. And I think it's a message for anyone listening is that it is working the muscle. It is creating the new grooves in the brain. And we just practice, and our lifetime is a practice. And that's why we're here, and keep
That's
with
right.
it. Yeah. I
That's
love
right.
that.
And in
Hmm.
terms of relationships, whether it's parenting, you're not always going to get it right. But walking back into your child's room and saying, you know what? I'm sorry. I just lost my patience. I'm sorry that I raised my voice. The content of what I want to share is really this,
Yeah.
but I'm really sorry for my delivery or my words. They were
Yeah.
not my okay. And with couples, my
Hmm.
gosh, it's never, you're never, who amongst us is a perfectly self-actualized being? Nobody that I know. So
No.
we're all a work in
Right.
progress. If we can love each other, and then when we stray, which every relationship does, bring each other back in the ring. And as you say, practice more deeper, mindful communication that bears
Mm-hmm.
information, more insight, more compassion, more connection, then all of a sudden we're holding hands again. It's that simple. Truly. We make it out to
Yes.
be super
Right.
hard, but
Yes.
when we
Yes.
learn the basics and we get
Hmm.
back to the basics, and a lot of times we weren't brought up with the basics. So people are playing out a lot of unprocessed trauma, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if we can say what didn't I receive and how can I give it to myself and
Yes.
my
Yes.
children and my partner,
Yeah.
then things really start to shift.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And you create that safety within yourself. And when you feel that safety within yourself to be like, allow yourself to go into that territory of saying what you need to say. And sometimes it might be messy, but that's the work. And that's, we've got beautiful people like you to guide us.
Well, like you and all of us that are just doing the best we can to just live this human experience and share some of what we've learned along the way, and for parents, sometimes you don't feel the safety, but you want to help your children feel safe, so you focus on that, which then
Mm,
brings it back to you. Sometimes we say fill your cup, and
yeah.
then but then sometimes
Hmm.
parents get an opportunity to reparent themselves as they're parenting their children. That's the reality.
Absolutely. Yes, a beautiful concept. So much that we touched upon today. There's not nearly enough time in this moment. There's enough time in
No,
life to do these talks, but I
I
appreciate
know.
you being here, Marcy. And where can the listeners find you?
There's a complimentary gift of an
Oh, yeah.
11-minute
Hmm.
meditation, which, by
Hmm.
the way, that speaks to what can we do
Okay.
in this busy, crazy world we're living in. So that's something. And then
Okay.
they'll be in my world where they'll, when I have something to share weekly
Okay.
or whenever, they'll be in the know. They can message me at Marcy at drmarcycole.com if they're interested in personal sessions. They can certainly sign up for First Tuesday Global Invites, which are
Great.
amazing. We have the most incredible speakers,
Oh,
really like incredible. And so there are a few ways right there.
that's beautiful. I'll put that all in the show notes and direct them your direction because I had, a while last year, I had another, I think she was an LCSW. She was a therapist for sure, but just like your website has so many great resources on it. So directing people and the
Yeah.
work of relationships, the work of connection, all of it. So thank you so much. And thanks to the listeners. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.